Good evening and welcome to the last session for today. Our final guest was faced with the unenviable challenge of finding a lump in her breast at age 23, followed by a terminal diagnosis. Kris Hallenga's life, like everyone who receives a cancer diagnosis, was thrown into complete turmoil. But in response, she founded the charity Coppafeel to raise awareness amongst younger women, got on the campaign trail in a big way, and 12 years on, here she is still with us, still living with cancer, but still very much alive. So that's 1/3 of her life living with cancer. Her recent and hugely popular book, Glittering a Turd, How Surviving the Unsurvivable Taught Me to Live, is described by Dawn O'Porter as a manifesto for how to be alive. And she goes on to say, it'll leave you calm, hopeful, and unafraid. A bold reminder to live your life your way. You'll be endlessly inspired by her perspective. Welcome, Kris.
Should probably unmute myself. Hi.
Lovely to be here to see you. So, thanks so much for joining us to share some of your extraordinary experience of being diagnosed at such a young age with terminal cancer. But then becoming part of the revolution that's redefining terminal by still being here today, 12 years later, to talk to us about life after diagnosis, as so graphically described in your new book, Glittering a Turd. So I'm guessing that in most of the many interviews you've done in those 12 years, the things you've been talking about most are probably your achievements, the things you've done, which, to be fair, is a lot. But without belittling those in any way, as they are quite extraordinary and completely deserving of lots of attention, what I'd like to do is to talk about the you behind those achievements, the you experiencing extreme challenges and living a very different sort of life to most of us. So at the outset, you describe writing your book as having a very unexpected outcome for you. You set out to write a book to share your experience for the benefit of others, but actually, as you wrote, it helped me discover me. So I'm guessing this was a kind of life-size discovery that indeed many failed to find in a much longer life, and in a way, it's a testament to the immeasurable resilience of the outward-looking, wanting to please persona that it could survive for a decade on the roller coaster of your life after diagnosis. Would you tell us about this discovery?
Yeah, going straight in then to David. I for so long, I think because I started the charity very, very, very quickly after my diagnosis, because I felt like I had to funnel all of this frustration and confusion and all the rest of it, all the emotions into something. I started the charity within just 3 months of my diagnosis.
Right.
And that was, that's not necessarily the healthiest thing to have done. I don't regret doing that at all, but I never allowed myself any time to really breathe, think, process what was going to happen to me and what was happening to me, because all I could focus on was what happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone else. Cancer education needs to happen for young people. That's all I could think about. And that became obviously my purpose, it became my everything, my whole world. And in some ways it still is, but not quite as much. It doesn't have the prominence that it did have in my life. And when I was starting to write the book, when I first pitched the book, I was going to call it How to Glitter a Turd. And that how became quite significant as I was writing it, because the more I was writing it, the more I was starting to realize that the book wasn't about everyone else. It was about me and what I was starting to learn about myself, what I started to discover, all the lessons I started to discover from these 12 years with cancer were coming out in my writing. And that's because I'd never given myself that time to do that before. And so that how word became like a real pressure, because in a sense it was like I was writing it to help someone else, and that had been my focus for 10-11 years. But I wanted to switch that up a bit and kind of look inwards a bit more and take the pressure away from saying this book's going to help you, to simply saying this is what I've learned. If it helps you, that's the bonus.
Right.
And that's why I changed it to Glittering a Turd instead of How to Glitter a Turd. But it really was a journey of self-discovery, as cliched as that sounds. Because I think for so long I was riding the wave, the same narrative around how cancer became this like new thing in my life that gave me this new direction. And actually it wasn't all negative, and it wasn't all, it didn't, and cancer wasn't the only thing that shaped me. There were other things that shaped me too. So I think it was a nice reminder for me too, because I think there was so much focus on cancer for so many years that I almost forgot about myself and then sort of rediscovered myself. So it was, I'm so chuffed by some of the things that people write to me about the book, how it's helping them, how it's giving them the words to describe how cancer's made them feel too, how it's helped them understand how to be around people with cancer. And I'm so chuffed by that. But more than anything, I'm so chuffed that I did that for myself.
Right.
For sure. But obviously I want people to buy it too.
Right. Don't forget to buy the book, folks. Just to go back though, this 10 years or whatever it was, where you were just full on doing stuff, basically, going to change the world. You were out there doing it. There does seem to me to be a connection between that energy and your survival against the odds. Would I be right?
Yes, you are. I with everything that I do in terms of treatments, and whether that's conventional or unconventional, I'd say it's not one thing, it's a combination of things. And having that drive and that purpose, and that, as Dr. Kelly Turner calls it, strong reason for living, as one of the key reasons as to why people survive longer than others. I think that in combination with everything else was really important, really, really important. And I often say, like, how can I bottle up this feeling, this like buzz around running the charity and campaigning and, you know, doing all the amazing things that I've been able to do with the charity? How can I bottle it up and give it to other cancer patients so they feel that too? But what I've started to realize, it's you can find that same level of drive, purpose, love of life through many things. It's not as always as extreme as starting a charity. No. And that's hopefully reassuring for other people.
Yes, probably right. No, for many people it's like, you know, my grandchild, I'm never going to see them and I'm going to stay alive, so they do. You know, this kind of thing is quite sufficient for somebody to have the purpose and will to stay alive.
Yeah. Actually, very early on in my diagnosis, I remember someone came to my house. She was actually, I think, someone from a magazine or something like that. She came to my house and she was like, "You're very different to other cancer patients, because my grandma, when she found out she had cancer, she just gave up and she died within a few weeks." And just hearing that story scared me so much. And if anything, was actually not great. And I don't like the whole spiel around, well, if you're not positive, you're going to die, because that allows no space for all the other feelings. So that was really terrifying for me, because after that I just thought, well, I can't be negative, I have to always be positive, I have to ensure that I always think that I'm going to survive and that I look to a future, and that's so unsustainable. But I was so naive at that point. I was absorbing everything and anything because I was so new to it. And obviously I have to say, it's not 12 years, it's now actually 13 years. It's 13 years next week. Yay. 13 years later, I've definitely got firmer thoughts and ideas about what I feel is right and wrong.
Well, the legendary Sophie Savage would knock that whole positivity thing very firmly on the head. in favor of being real, which can include lots of good, forward thinking, planning about your life and the things you want to do and everything else. But it might include lots of other things as well.
Yeah. She definitely carved the path for so many of us to understand what living with cancer is like and what it can be like. And I always remember her saying that, and obviously it's a quote that I use in the book as well, that you can rest in peace before you die.
Yes.
And that was so important for me to hear from someone like her. And I also love that she once called me one of the giver shits.
Yeah.
People that are doing good stuff in the cancer space, she called the giver shits.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be a giver shitter.
So Petrea King was the last speaker on a Sunday night of our first weekend this year, and she was in this space as well, where she was actually helping people to find, to change their destination to being one of finding some peace, and all the rest can follow in behind that, and it's very important, isn't it? Because if you're putting your faith in the things that come and go, the transient things in life, then that's a shaky basis for going forward when you've got a terminal diagnosis.
Yes. Petrea's talk was amazing.
It was.
Just when I think, oh, I know everything, I don't. I absolutely don't. She was incredible. She taught me so much on top of what I already know. It's amazing.
So, curious enough, discovering you has turned out to be something hugely important to share. As cancer is one of the experiences in life that's got the power to burst the bubble of immortality that we like to think we live in, and make us seriously question what we're up to. So that is a fantastic thing to share, and it's the fact that your book wasn't quite what you planned is no bad thing, obviously.
No, and I talk about how cancer has helped me shape my relationship with my own immortality, and one of the chapters is called Going to the Maldives. And I'm not a fan of euphemisms when it comes to dying. I think if someone's died, they've died, they haven't gone somewhere. That's true, that's certainly how I say it anyway. But a few years ago we were in a strategy meeting at Coppafeel, and we were doing we were future-proofing the charity, and we were doing succession planning, and instead of saying when Kris dies, we put when Kris goes to the Maldives, because it sounded slightly more pleasant on that strategy piece of paper. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of work on working out how I feel about death and dying, and in turn I believe that has helped me live better. I bang this drum a lot about the pure brilliance of palliative care, hospice care, and accessing. I mean, research shows the sooner you access palliative care, the more likely you're going to live longer than the people that access it later. I mean, that in itself is obviously testament to what it is there for, which is to make you live better rather than die quicker. And I think that's not something they get told about. Like so many things during my life with cancer, I had to make all of these discoveries myself, because there is no handbook to this. But I think in doing those self-discoveries, I have become a better advocate for my own health out of it, because nothing's been handed to me on a plate, that's for sure. But yeah, accessing hospice care, palliative care from an early stage, I think was key to me understanding that I'm not here forever, but equally that doesn't mean I'm going to die tomorrow, and I can make the most of today. And I think before that was a notion that I'd obviously heard about, but it's not until you do that work yourself. And I've done various things, and I recently did a 10-week end of life doula course, not because I want to become a doula, but because I wanted to understand what it is that people like doulas help people with towards the end of life, because I hate surprises. I don't want to be surprised by something suddenly as I'm lying on my deathbed. I want to understand, and that's me. I want to understand more than anything. I want to understand what's really going to happen, and with that knowledge I find huge power, huge reassurance, and it means I can like store that somewhere in my brain or on a piece of paper in a drawer in my cupboard, and it's done. I don't have to really chew on that one any longer.
You're no longer endlessly avoiding it. Yeah,
No.
yeah, great. Yeah, well, I was listening to a program on Radio 4 yesterday, I think, about the whole palliative care movement and the thinking of the woman. I was so impressed by the woman who set it up and the way she developed the whole thing.
I think her name was Cecil
I
Saunders.
don't remember her name, but I was very impressed with the story. But it's interesting. I mean, palliative care to most people, including me a while ago, just meant, to help you die. And really, that's not what it's all about these days. And I wish that some of what they've learned would rub off on hospitals. That's where they need it. But they still manage to hive it off and keep it separate at the moment as palliative care in that way. But I think it's an amazing movement.
Yeah. Well, we need to maybe change the word.
I think a new word would be good.
Palliative care is such a scary word, I think.
It is now. I don't think it really means anything scary, but it's just got to mean, helping people die well, Anyway, so a small bone to pick with you. I gather from your book, I'm not really supposed to describe you as inspirational, as you think that getting an incurable disease doesn't qualify you for being inspirational. But I have to say, I take a little bit of issue with that, because the inspirational bit, I don't think it's to do with getting cancer, which is, you're right, any of us can get cancer, but it's how you respond to getting cancer is what people find inspirational about your story. And this aspect of it, which is the piece that you've been on another journey of discovery with writing your book, will inspire people as well, I think, and hopefully to find out about themselves in ways that you did.
Yeah. I truly believe everyone's got a book in them. If I could write a book, you can write a book.
I have actually, so I know that. So at age 23, I'm guessing you felt you were really just getting started with life, a bright future ahead, making plans, finding out about being independent. Anyone who hasn't got personal experience of something as life-changing as a diagnosis of incurable cancer would probably have difficulty imagining the effect it would have on their sense of self, their carefully constructed personal identity. I wonder if you could tell us about this experience and the place it took you to in yourself.
I think before cancer, I didn't have much of an identity, and I very much latched on to what other people thought of me rather than what I thought of myself. So I think I was always scared to trust my own feelings, trust my own thoughts about anything before I was diagnosed. And I think when it comes to cancer, I suddenly had to really listen to what was going on with me. And I had to listen to my body a lot, because constantly I was being asked, do you have this symptom? Do you have that? Do you have this? Do you have that? And suddenly I had to start this communication with my body that I'd never done before. Obviously, for months and months, potentially years, I had this lump growing in my breast, and I have no idea how long it had been growing for. I think I was ignoring things for quite some time. And it pains me every time I think about that, because I think things could have been so vastly different. And obviously it didn't help that when I did end up eventually going to the doctors and them saying it's nothing to worry about, it's a hormonal thing because you're a young woman, I didn't feel like I had any leg to stand on, because they're professionals and they should know. And that again was due to lack of understanding that I should know my body better than anyone else, because no one had ever told me that. So I think, in the same way as me absorbing everything that a doctor said, I just became this passive. I was this passive person for a very long time. I was a passive child even. I was very well behaved. didn't ever put a foot wrong, was too scared to do that. And then suddenly cancer comes and messes up your life. And you have to start considering what matters, who's in your life, what do you want still. You just suddenly get faced with lots and lots of big questions that you hadn't considered. And I think, at 23, I was going, no one really understands what they want out of life truly by that point. So I am totally not, I can be very forgiving of that 23-year-old me, but it certainly helped me understand how I was key to my own happiness and I was important, which I had no idea before. So in terms of identity, I think so many people don't want to truly, I think people are quite allergic to the idea that cancer becomes their identity, but for so long I had to latch onto something new, and that was me dealing with cancer, me having that thing inside of me that was paving this new path for me, and that was okay. I didn't see that as an evil thing at all. I thought I could see that as a really valuable teacher in a way, to kind of guide me on what I suddenly started to have to, all the things I needed to unlearn and then relearn about myself and my body, and that connection between mind, body, spirit, or whatever. I needed to understand all of that, and I almost like had to scratch off everything that I already thought and start again. So for a while I was happy to pin my identity on cancer, my identity on becoming a survivor and all the other cliches, until I got to the point where I was like, wow, I've got to the point where I like myself and I understand myself, and I've got a really good communication between me and my body now. Maybe I don't need the cancer thing to really help define that so much anymore. And that was really, really liberating, but it took some time.
What did something in particular usher in that new thought that maybe you don't need that?
I think when I came to the point when I was working in London and running the charity full time, and I decided that I no longer wanted to run it full time anymore. And I always thought if I could get to charity to the point where it could run without me, then I already feel like the whole emphasis on the charity is less dependent on who I am and whether I'm alive or not. And that gave me sort of reassurance that I am not Coppafeel. Obviously, I am the history of Coppafeel. I am the story that started the charity, but I'm not the charity. And if I'm not the charity, then do I really have to be cancer all the time? No. And so I kind of shed a few layers, and shed a few responsibilities and pressures, and moved to Cornwall.
Right.
Moved away from London.
I'm sure that was liberating. I can
Yeah, it was, and I felt so proud of myself to be able to do that and have the confidence to do that. And I was a single woman, and I think a lot of people are scared to move out to the country when they're in their early 30s, or was I even 30? Yeah, I was just 30 on my own with a cat. Right. Usually people see that as a very sorry situation, but for me it was so liberating.
Right. You can never tell on the face there, eh? Okay, so I wonder if we could go on to talk a bit about hope now. I would say that hope is an essential ingredient of life, a force that's got the power to lead us forward into tomorrow with the expectation of good things, or when things are really hard, at least the expectation of better things. So when there you are faced with an illness for which there's no cure, it's a situation in which hopefulness can shrivel, wither away, even die, taking with it our life force, like your relative you described. So many people who are listening to this may be struggling to find reasons to be hopeful. So can you talk to us about your experience of hope and how it relates to the choices you've made?
The same with my book, the same with me sharing my story. I think for a long while, the only thing I could focus on is the fact that if someone else could see that someone else is living with this longer than they might expect, then that will give them hope to survive longer than their expected time. And had there been someone like me spouting about breast cancer and stuff when I was diagnosed, maybe I could really visualize that this was possible and doable. But what I've since realized is it doesn't have to take one person. I think just in the fact that cancer is so unpredictable and that there are never any guarantees is almost a good thing, because it allows for endless possibilities. There is no one size fits all, which again is good. And this is why I believe that personalized care, individualized treatment is so important, because it can affect everyone so differently. And I think if there was like a guarantee that I was going to die, then we wouldn't be having this conversation to be like, well, that there is no hope. But there is, because cancer is this mysterious thing that we haven't really fully figured out yet. No one has the answers, really. There's a combination of answers that'll help.
Yeah.
But no one has a clear-cut answer. So therefore, what else is there? Then that leaves an opportunity that hope still can exist. And I think that's really important for me. I think a lot of times, because I have obviously been very open about doing an integrative approach, and I've been doing that since about 2016, so about 6 years. And at first I was so scared to talk about it, and I know a lot of patients feel the same way, because they're so scared of the stigma, and that someone will turn around and say, well, you're just wasting money on snake oil, and standard things like that, standard remarks like that, because I just don't understand. And I think we're so scared of the rejection from the people in our life. We're so scared of the rejection from the oncologists that we keep it hidden. The longer I was surviving, the more I'm comfortable speaking about it, and that it has helped me so much. But I think still there's this sort of judgment that people are dealing out false hope. And I think and also sometimes we go to oncologists and we just hope that they give us a drug. And sometimes you're wondering if they're doing that because they feel like they should, or because they truly think that it's going to help. And then you question whether that is real hope or false hope. But actually, I don't actually believe there is a thing called false hope. I just don't think that exists. There's either hope or no hope.
I agree.
It's just false hope is basically another word for misinformation. So there's either hope, no hope, or misinformation. Okay. So that's what I concentrate on. But as so many people say, if you haven't got hope, what have you got?
Yeah, I really feel that. I'm just interested though, you were faced, you say you're only 23 and they're using this word terminal, and terminal has all this kind of certainty about it. You are going to die, proved that you've shown them they were wrong, because, you certainly weren't supposed to live this long. But how did you get over this certainty, to getting to the place you talk about now, where there's lots of possibilities?
Do you know what? It's actually interesting, because no one actually did use the word terminal. That is the word that I started using for people to understand my situation. Because sometimes unless you use the brutal words like terminal, people don't really get it.
Right.
And so I started saying things like, well, I was given a terminal diagnosis because, in other words, someone said, there's a treatment, you've been diagnosed with cancer, it's incurable, you're not going to be cured, but we can treat you, therefore it is terminal. But that's the association that I made. But I talk about this in the book, how on the day that I was diagnosed I was diagnosed 1 week with primary breast cancer, and 1 week later I was told it had already spread, because we did scans in that time. And on that day in February 2009, he said to me, it has spread, it's now in your spine, it's already in your spine. But that was it. He didn't then go, and this is what I know, that you're likely to die between 2 to 3 years, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. He literally didn't say anything.
Okay.
And my only question to him was, is there anything that you suggest I don't do right now? And the only thing he said was, jump out of a plane. And I said, that's good, because I had not planned to do that. And so he said, well, then you're good. And obviously then he referred me to the oncologist and I started treatments. But it's, again, only in writing the book and looking back at that conversation that I realized that he allowed me to think whatever possibilities could happen. I think endless possibilities could happen. He didn't say because ultimately there are statistics that he could have spouted out to me.
Yes.
But they're just averages. And how are averages calculated? Because someone's doing something better, like going beyond that point, and someone's at the low point.
Yeah.
And in the middle, they've just found these few numbers. But for me, that if nothing else, it meant that I was going to be one of those people that inched the numbers in the higher range. So he left, as I say in the book, a window of opportunities and hopefulness wide open.
Well, that's very nice. Because it would have been a hard thing to cope with, wouldn't it, at that age, to be faced with a kind of brick wall of like, you've got 3 months to live kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, well, do you know what? 3 months? Because if someone's saying you've got 3 months, it's very likely that you are very, very unwell. There's this amazing short film by Atul Gawande online. He's written that book, Being Mortal. And he's the doctor that has to tell people how long they've got left, and he has to give people diagnoses and prognoses. And he talks about this dilemma of how much time when do people really need to understand when they're going to die, and when can we honestly and say that someone's going to have a longer life. And I think if someone's giving someone an estimate that is more than 2 years, then that's utter bullshit.
Right.
Use my French.
Making it up.
But if it's like months, then there is probably some proof that someone is very sick and that the chances of them surviving a really long time is slimmer. But that doesn't mean it's not impossible. And hopefully that will then spur someone on to go, right, this is important. I now need to get on with healing very, very quickly. So I think it helps people judge where they're at, but only in certain circumstances. And it's the months and weeks that I think are important to understand, because having done all my work on preparing for death and understanding death and dying, and how death and dying can be an okay experience, if you could put it like that, at some stage you have to kind of go to that point where you realize that you're dying. Because for me, I'm scared for it to come out completely out of the blue. I do not want that. I need to understand. And I think the more I speak to my oncologist, the more he understands that at some stage I want no more bullshit. I need to be told what's what. And I think he gets that. But that's not now. That's not now, because right now I have other drugs available to me, and there is still this very wide open window of opportunities and hopefulness. But when there is a clear understanding that someone is very, very unwell, I think there needs to be some transparency and understanding of survival.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so that thing that you've been talking about, the uncertainty around cancer, of course, that's the world you live in once you've been diagnosed. It's all about uncertainty, so it's par for the course, and everyone has a different response to having uncertainty thrust upon them. It's never really a welcome intrusion on our carefully constructed security, but nonetheless, despite its appearance as a sort of destructive fire burning our precious lives away, it also brings something wholesome in its wake. As another way you could describe living with uncertainty could be living with reality. For truthfully, the precious certainties that keep us safe psychologically and emotionally are just made up. We make them up, don't we? So I just wondered if you could say something about your experience of living with uncertainty.
Big questions.
Sorry.
Uncertainty, discuss. Do you know what? I've never been a big planner. I've never been one of those people that really has scoped out what their life should look like. So I think that's helped me understand that life could go in different directions, and has helped me to adjust to swaying with the wind a bit more. And I feel lucky in some senses because I've met so many countless women who have dreamed of a life with children and things like that, where they see themselves in that particular situation. And sometimes I feel so glad that I'm free of that feeling, because therefore I cannot be disappointed, because I never expected those things of my life anyway, never wanted them even. So that I think helps me with living with uncertainty. I think 13 years of experience has helped with uncertainty. It's so interesting. Like, I'm very good at dishing out advice when someone's waiting for scan results, or is having some kind of a niggle or whatever when it comes to cancer. I'm very good at telling them that they don't know until they know. And that means, like, there's no point in worrying about something that you don't actually know is fact. But then when it comes to me and my scanxiety and waiting for results, like, it's a very different picture, because I do worry. But for the rest of the time, if I'm well, then that's all I focus on. I just focus on what I can do that day, and then I do that thing that day. I really am very able to take each day as it comes, and I think that possibly helps as well. So I think, unfortunately, when it comes to cancer, you have to be flexible and you have to allow for whatever might come your way. And I get that for some people that's really, really, really hard. But in a way, like you just said, maybe that then allows for other things to come your way, and other opportunities to come your way, and learnings and understandings about life, that for other people completely passes them by, because they're not living with anxieties of uncertainties and all those things, because they have an almost naive understanding that life will be the way they planned. And for us, we have a very clear understanding that that's not the case.
Right.
And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm.
So I think my relationship with uncertainty changes still, even now after 13 years. But I think, so obviously we spoke recently, we had a rehearsal for this talk, and I just found out that cancer had progressed again in my liver. And I was actually in a real pickle, because at that stage I didn't know what was next. That's when I really struggle. I've had crap news and I don't know what's happening next. That in between stage, that's when I'm at my worst. But as soon as I have a plan, I'm fine, because that's all I focus on. I put all my energy into that, and then I know what's what. But it's the not knowing what's what is the hardest part for me, and I try and make that as easy and doable for me as possible by ensuring that people around me can make it less stressful. So for example, I am able to text my oncologist and say, I'm crawling up the walls, you need to tell me what the scans say.
Right.
And that's the kind of relationship that I've now got with him, where I can say, I'm going crazy, you need to tell me what's going on. Or I have a nurse that can chase that up as well. I don't necessarily want to go to hospitals to find out bad information. I'm happy to get it on the phone. And I think for some people that can really differ as well. But so I think there's things that you can put in place to make things slightly less anxiety inducing and stressful. And I've managed to work out some things, but I'm certainly not all the way there yet.
Well, I mean, I don't think you'd be human if you didn't get anxious about these kind of situations.
Exactly.
And when you say that's the hardest part for me, I think you could take the "for me" off the end and just say that's the hardest part, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what life is like, and faced with those kind of situations. So we're nearly finished. I'm aware of the fact that I've just been totally ignoring the Q&A down the side. Is there anything in there you want to give a quick answer to before we finish? Have you got it up? Yeah.
People are just saying some really nice things
Well,
about my book, which is lovely.
that's just what you need. Very good.
Um,
That
there's actually a bit in my book that I wanted to read out for anyone that hasn't read it. about it, and it kind of reflects on like how I feel about my own healing journey, you know, and my understanding of what, you know, me navigating what integrative care means to me.
Okay, let's have it.
Healing never stops, and that is actually great. We are conditioned to believe in and want easily achieved gains, instant gratification, and the ability to return to normal after a burst of effort. But it doesn't work that way. The best thing you can hope for is a love affair with your healing journey, for it to be so fun, enjoyable, and explorative that you don't even want to return to what once was. Cancer has shattered you, but also rebuilt you. That transformation might mean you do not fit in the same old conversations or relationships or thoughts or life anymore. Maybe it really never has been about a cure. Maybe what we should all be striving for is to be healed.
What a great message. Well, I'm quite happy to leave it there, actually, if you are. That's a great quote. Thank you so much. That you wrote that? That's your description of healing?
My words.
Yeah, you're not quoting somebody else. Well, it's fantastic. It's a really brilliant quote. So, yeah, kudos to you for finding a way to say that. All right. Well, look, been a real pleasure. And despite all your protestations, you are a great inspiration to a lot of people. And I'm sure you'll continue to be so. And it's been lovely to talk to you tonight. And I can tell by what's coming up on the chat that it's enormously appreciated by everybody who's here sharing this time with us. So
thank you. And I appreciate everything that you and Yes to Life and Penny Braun and everyone does. I think it's so important, and I wish it had been around when I was first diagnosed. And it's given people oodles of hope. So thank you.